Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3, playing Black Ice 8.52. Of course, we're playing Britain, England, the United Kingdom. Many different names for sort of one place. So what does Brazil want? We give them money for right now. Uh-oh, we've had a major defeat. Decline. Yeah, the destruction of this, our Norwegian force. Well, like I said before, the best thing we can say is it's distracted a lot of units from the battle in Russia. That's the only thing we can say about it. We could have, but of course the bad thing is we could have pulled out and did basically the same thing, and it'd still take them a long time to get all these units back. So needn't have been trapped to achieve that goal. Okay, truck and prime mover reliability has increased. We'll increase our artillery brigades. That'll help. Thing that's not going so well, but is not a any sort of disaster, is that Germany is now intervened in. Come on, we should have the air base, the air fight. Okay, there they are. Intervened here. Oh, that was Corps in Norway, I think. Who knows? Maybe some of the other units will shatter and we'll reconstitute them. Yeah. Reconstituting shattered units is much better than building from scratch. We're trying to save this one last division here. Oh, wait a minute. We're getting another division shattered? Well, good. Any division up here we can have shatter. It's going to be so much cheaper to... Okay, stop the attack there. We're still going to have to reoccupy the province, but... Well, at this point, I'm happy for any of these units up here that shatter. Machine gun focused advance. That, I believe, is here with the fighters. I'm going to pause this and be right back. Alright, I'm back. Let's see. Still looking, see what techs we can improve that will help. Yeah. Help out our twin engine bombers a bit. One good thing with, I mean, there's many good things, but of course we often highlight the bad things. With Hearts of Iron 4 is units like this gain experience over time, but if you take a lot of heavy casualties like this one obviously has here, its replacement levels will reduce the experience levels. So if you know, going along having low levels of losses, you'll gain lots of experience and it'll become a highly decorated experience, whatever you want to call it, unit. But if it shatters a lot with all of the great bulk of replacements, it will not get much experience there. Well, we won that. How interesting. They'll be attacking again. Of course, it's partly the season now. Here, we've got to feed back in. Now, this unit has 2 battle. We want to mix one of these battle commanders here, because they should be Can I get them out? No, that's sort of the problem with some of these, because they're shown as foreign built and I can't reorganize these. Because those battle commanders should be in frontline units, is how they're really effective. Okay, that unit's in okay shape. Maybe not as good, but we'll send them forward. Not that I can't have a step back, we can do that, we're not Hitler here. But I prefer to have them shatter on my unit. We are, of course. Don't want to risk bringing in the ships, so we're taking the time to send them fairly rapidly, but overland. Okay, yeah, you're gone. Okay. On board the ship. And they did very well, apparently not having any problems. We're getting you back home. Oh, what was that? Were you being attacked? Or is that? Oh, fighters. Okay, don't seem to do any lasting damage. Hopefully they'll get out. Okay, good. We've gotten rid of both of those pockets. Good, really slow movement through these jungles. Okay, now it seems like everybody is here. Let's send in some of these Chinese to help overwhelm them. Well, maybe we need a bit more. Sure, Eritreans from the desert would do absolutely well in a jungle. They would feel so at home. Well, we're winning that fight up in Norway somehow. Now the Gurkhas did fairly well for jungle, I do believe. Maybe just because they do fairly well anywhere, but being from a very high mountainous area, not known for its jungle. Okay, we've gotten Jungle Colonizer back and World Medical Leader back, so we must have retaken. Yes, right here. Some good resources. Okay, short-barreled HE gun, high explosives. As we battle on most continents on the planet now, not South America, I don't think. And of course, we don't do Antarctica here, but yeah, you guys should be taking out those Italian bombers and any attacking aircraft. Yeah, well, you're gobbling up the undefended provinces there. Blitzkrieg Doctrine. Okay, got a couple more fighters. I think we've got an HQ here I want to use. Yeah, let's attach you to Fighter Command. Saw a posting, I don't know how many of you are following it, maybe even closer than I am, but they hope to get, Panzer and crew, hope to get version 1 of Black Ice out for Hearts of Iron 4 sometime in August. I don't disbelieve them, but I do think it's probably going to be later August rather than early August, just experience shows me that. Not that they're... Okay, so we've got all of our cheap build convoys that we're going to get, if I remember the event right. But 900 is pretty good, so not that I don't care about the ones we're losing in the meantime, that we have been and we will continue. It's partially how much of the Navy I want to... remember we took that big pounding in the Mediterranean earlier, and how much do I want to try to escort them with on-map units. Okay, send you guys back in. Okay, I finally got Kirkness. Yeah, go ahead, shatter these guys, please do. Wow. Not that we can hold out there indefinitely, but they're sure messing with the Germans. That's good. Well, May should be fairly good weather up there for. They're attacking. Okay, reconnaissance unit, combined arms. Motorized HQs have advanced. That's good. Let's do mountain HQs. Infantry support weapons. Okay. We will do machine gun focused battalions. It's a bit more of a German thing than I think a British thing, but it'll help. For those of you who may be watching this in future years, as things tend to be done on YouTube, I'm recording this on the day after the big Nice attack, where I think 84 plus people died, and on the day of the latest Turkish coup. Of course, those of you watching sort of immediately, currently, as we're doing this, will know this, of course, but the world is getting more interesting. Don't know what's going to happen with the coup. I sort of kind of support it. I say that because I don't quite know exactly all the details about it. But generally speaking, the army in Turkey will will work to, if not technically restore democracy, because, I'm trying to think of how to put this best, and this is hopefully going to be a short monologue, but a lot of people recognize democracy in and of itself, just democracy, as being a valued thing, so that they will knee-jerk reaction, say support or support the Turkish president because he was elected and it's the people's will, blah 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 blah. Well, yeah, but the Nazis were elected, okay? So, not Hitler so much, he was more appointed. There were votes afterwards that, didn't quite elect him to office, but reaffirmed his position there. So, do people that support democracy as a good thing, as a good value in and of itself, the will of the people, do they support the will of the people in removing democracy? Well, since everybody now, or the majority now and forever, will agree that whatever this form of government is the form of government we want, so we no longer need to hold elections. And this is something that people, shall we call, in the West, don't necessarily understand. In some parts of the world, they're still tribal. I'm not talking about Africa, or I'm not talking about the Amazon jungle, those type of things. I'm talking about, and now they do happen there too, but I'm talking about India, for example, is, realize the borders here, but this is India. Well, it didn't stay together. It got split up between the sort of, if you will, the tribe of the Muslims and the tribe of the Hindus. And to some degree, they had all seen themselves as Indian, and there were lots and lots and lots of Muslims in the Hindu regions, and there were lots of Hindus in the Muslim regions, and they sort of saw themselves all as, if you will, ethnically Indian. And so they divided up along, now this happened to be a religious distinction, but we can go to a place like Iraq that had a 50 plus year secular state, and a dictatorship, definitely, but still something of the sort of pseudo-Westernish kind of thing. But still, the country sees itself as tribal groups, not as Iraqis. Now, a lot of this defined, again, along religious grounds, but, you know, you keep hearing about, well, a good part, the majorities are the Shiites are the majorities in Iraq. I may be wrong about this, and someone can look it up. But they're not. The Shiites are not the majority in Iraq. To the best of my knowledge, they are not in the majority in Iraq. The Sunnis are the majority in Iraq. But of the Arabs, the Shiites are the majority. Meaning, I do believe the Kurds are Sunni. I believe. I may be wrong on that. But I do believe if you put the Sunni Arab and the Kurds and the Sunni Kurds together, they outnumber the Shiite Arabs. Kurds is not a religion. Kurds is an ethnic group. I don't know how racial it is versus just culture, language, other values. And so people sometimes will confuse the two. But Kurd is an ethnic group. So, and you will find, especially when the Anbar Awakening, when the U.S. went out to certain tribes that were Sunni, that were maybe not overly acting against the U.S. occupation, but were sort of acting against the U.S. Occupation and allowing others to come in and attack. Once they sort of went and negotiated a peace with that tribe, all of the members of the tribe basically flipped allegiance and realized that, yeah, these Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which has now become ISIS, is a bad group and ultimately not the best for us, so we'll support the other side, which was the U.S. and the Iraqi central government, which is, because U.S. mishandling has been allowed to overly be dominated by the Shiites. But so they would all flip sides, so that within one area, one region, one group of people, they all, if you will, vote or support their group, as opposed to an ideology as to, oh, socialism is better, or capitalism, or some of us want education for women and others of us don't, or whatever it might be. They don't divide up along those ideas. They divide up, and I guess you can say nationalism is a tribe too if you want to continue to go, but I'm talking at a much more localized thing. So you get in the parts of the world in Iraq, they sort of kind of want referendum to a democracy to vote and see how big their tribal support is, and then they don't care about voting anymore because they've shown that, hey, our group and the allies of our group got 30% of the popular vote, and we get that many seats in Parliament. And however much power Parliament may or may not have, voting is sort of done. We don't need to keep voting. And so it's sort of, and if one tribe isn't going to go kill the other tribe, it sort of lessens the violence and does that. And it get back to the point of, as we saw, that, oh, get rid of Mubarak in Egypt because he's corrupt and he's a dictator. Yes, he was corrupt. Yes, he was a dictator. Well, we got to do democracy. We got to do democracy. And there was a lot of significant elements, particularly in a few of the larger cities like Cairo and Alexandria, that were sort of somewhat secular. Some were more secular than others, but sort of Western looking, wanting to keep, good relations with the West and have tourists and all this kind of stuff. Sort of the, freedom aspect. they were sort of upset with Mubarak because of his control. Well, let's have votes. Well, there's a lot of rural population. There's lots of people living in Egypt. The popular will was to move towards the Muslim Brotherhood because that was the most popular. Now, I don't know the difference, because I don't know Egypt well enough to know how tribal the Arab, because various in different parts of the world there are significant Arab tribes. I don't know how the cities break down. I don't know how city Arabs are versus a bit more rural Arabs. And not all Arabs are horse riding or camel riding people out in the desert. A lot of the Arabs are settled farmers in places like Egypt and Iraq. They're not the Lawrence of Arabia type Arab. But so that they used democracy as a tool to elect a government that was going to, with a popular support and quite possibly a majority support, though I don't know if you put together all of the opposition groups to the Muslim Brotherhood, I think they would have been in the majority, but they gave up supporting a unified opposition, that of Mubarak, to fracture, and then because they were fractured, the largest unified group was coming to power. I sort of kind of think that that's the situation in Turkey, in that Erdogan doesn't necessarily have, I don't know the details, majority support in Turkey, but he has plurality support, or the largest support of the largest group of Turks, so that they will use democracy as a tool to, in essence, end democracy eventually, if not immediately, but over time, and through building a certain level of consensus. Sort of what basically happened, not sort of, basically what happened in Germany with Hitler's takeover. He used voting and democracy as a tool to gain power, in which he removed voting and democracy. Because you can have voting, and like when Saddam Hussein, got 90+% of the vote, well, he was the only person on the ticket. You're either voting for him or you're not voting, and very few people had the guts to not vote or vote against him, sort of a referendum. So you can have these various, and if you played Third Reich events, you've seen the actual voting thing, a big circle for Hitler and a little circle down in the corner saying no or whatever. Which one are you going to pick? And it's not like you really had a lot of choices. It's just sort of vote this way or you don't get the vote. So it's not, voting in and of itself is not democracy, but also allowing, if your goal, if your value is democracy, part of it in a Western sense is that it continues, not vote to a goal and then your only choice is which Muslim Brotherhood representative do you want to have represent from this district? There's 4 candidates, they're all Muslim Brotherhood, but which one do you want to have representative? That, and I don't know how if there was any of that kind of voting in Germany. The Nazis, I don't think so. I think all the Gauleiters are basically appointed. But in Iran, that's sort of the way it is there is democracy in Iran, in that they have a very limited and maybe only a single party, and it sort of changed at different times. So I don't know exactly how it was in the last so much, but they're all sort of parties that support the Ayatollah Khomeini. You get to vote for which representative from that party. So it's sort of like voting within the party. What in America we call a primary. You're a Republican or you're a Democrat. You vote in the Republican or Democrat. You're given, in America, unlike I think in Britain, where they sort of appoint, or a small council appoints who the local party representative is. Anybody can throw their hat in the ring for the primary, and it's the one who gets the most votes. Maybe there's a runoff if no one gets enough. It depends on what the conditions are. but that determines for the party. Then you go into the general election and you have every, your representative from every party to vote for. So if your goal is to maintain as a value voting in democracy, a pluralistic democracy, you have the problem of places like modern day Italy, in which you have a communist party. You have, what's it called now? I forget what the fascist party morphed into. Now I know there's several. There's some new parties there too, but you get parties running in elections that don't agree with ultimately the concept of democracy, but if they are in the true minorities, that's acceptable because they don't get into power. What you have to realize is in places that aren't, let's call this ethnically ready for pluralistic democracies. I think that's a good way to put it, because I don't think people by race are different levels of intelligence or whatever, but trust me, I don't want somebody, a native of the Amazon who lives in a primitive condition, to have any say over world decisions. They just aren't educated enough. Okay, it's an education thing. It's not a race thing because they're a Brazilian Indian or whatever you want to call them. They've never read Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, or John Locke, or anybody else. Now, of course, that may also be true of most American citizens, but still they're much better educated about the world, and they know that Turkey exists. They know that, they understand on a much better basis. So I'm in that way sort of a culturalist, not a racist. Look at people's cultures and viewpoints. So in that sense, I don't want equal votes from the people around the world because they're not necessarily ready. So when you look at Turkey, modern day Turkey, or modern day Egypt, you really need to have, in my opinion, a limited democracy, meaning Muslim Brotherhood was started basically, the movement more or less was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. If you've been following, again, Third Reich events, he was the guy in sort of the white pseudo turban or whatever you want to call it that Hitler supported, that he was supporting uprising here. That morphed into the Muslim Brotherhood. They supported terrorism for a while. They realized that terrorism wasn't going to overthrow. I mean, they're the ones that killed Sadat in a terrorist attack. You got to remember these things, people. They more or less realized that terrorism wasn't going to achieve their goals effectively in Egypt, so they changed focus there. But it was the Muslim Brotherhood that spawned Al-Qaeda, and which spawned ISIS. So they are they're trying to get to the same place that ISIS is, more or less. Might have slight doctrinal differences over Islam and how to live. I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but it's a very similar thing. To a Westerner, it's close enough. And they're just going about it by a different way, and will ultimately support these other movements. So you need a limited democracy to say, Muslim Brotherhood or Nazis or whatever in Germany, where they might come to power. They're not going to come to power in the US, but you don't get to have your party represented in the elections. And so you can vote for other acceptable parties, and then if we see that you've taken over other parties, we can get rid of those. So it has to be, in my opinion, if you're going to hold democracy as a value, you need to have it in other parts of the world. You need to have it limited to parties and ideologies that will accept limits on the democratic power, because if you look at I know there's people that want to change it, but the U.S. is a very famous one, is we do not have true democracy because we have a constitution. Now there is methods, and they're very complicated, and they take years to do. You can change the Constitution. You got to go through, without going through a constitutional convention, you got to pass more than just pass a law in Congress. You've got to, pass the constitutional amendment by a certain amount, I forget, and then it's got to be ratified by a certain percentage of the states, and it's more than 50%. And so it goes all the way through all of this process, and it's like 20 years later or 10 years later, if there isn't like, oh, we've got to get rid of the Volstead Act, which is, prohibition. That can happen quickly if America makes up its mind we made a mistake over prohibition. Because it took many, many years to get prohibition, the constitutional amendment, there passed in the first place. But once they sort of decided to get rid of it, it sort of, boom, happened fast, because people were seeing that it needed to change. So unless there's a strong consensus, generally it takes a long time for a constitutional amendment comes due for the U.S. So if Congress or the President passes a law that then an individual, literally an individual, or a state or a city government or a group of people challenge in the courts, it goes up to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court has a say on it, whether it's constitutional or not. So it's limiting democracy. It's it's, in that sense, it's limiting democracy. It has to, the people in power can only make decisions and pass laws that are constitutional. Other countries, one of the guy I like a lot of his history programs, Dan Snow, tweeted on the Twitter. Is there a Twitter person who's an expert on the British Constitution? And I sort of thought about it for a few hours, and I sort of tweeted him back. Does Britain really have a constitution? Yeah, I know it has a bunch of laws, but is that really a constitution? See, I don't think there's a British Constitution, because the British Constitution, if I understand it from my history courses, is simply the collected laws of Britain. So the Constitution of Britain, in essence, changes and flows with every act of Parliament that gets approved and goes through, and it changes. And then, yes, maybe if Stoke out here, City Council passes a law, and I don't even know how much the Stoke City Council or County Council or whatever it might be, passes a law or an ordinance, that then maybe you can challenge in court to see if it's contrary to any parliamentary laws, because they have supremacy over any laws passed in local Stoke or something. And so you may find a local Stoke law unconstitutional. I don't think in the British system you can find a Parliament's passed law as being unconstitutional. So that's, in my opinion, not a constitution. It's a body. Well, it's a constitution only in the vague sense that I guess Plato really sort of used the term constitution as simply the constitution was simply the form of government: monarchy, dictatorship, democracy, aristocracy, and then the sort of particulars of that localized version of the government. So in that sense, Britain does have a constitution, and in that sense, basically any state has a constitution, but not what we normally see, and this has gone on longer than I anticipated. But so with you seeing what's happening in Turkey and what's recently happened in Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood, you have that. Now, I personally do not hold democracy in and of itself a high value, but what I do hold as a high value is a representative form of government in which a significant element is voted on by a willing segment of the population. It may sort of sound like democracy, but it isn't. I would sort of kind of wish the U.S. senators would go back to being elected by the state assembly. It used to be that the California State Senate itself would elect the senators that would go to Washington. Now, of course, California, the majority of the state senators are Democrats. They would normally, and traditionally in those days, they would pick, from their own sort of club, pick one of them and send them off to Washington. So we wouldn't have a shift from Democratic senators to Republican senators in California. But I sort of wish the senators were a bit less Democrat. You're still elected by a body of people elected by the people of the state. Where I'm not suggesting that the senator be appointed by the governor, because you can have a popular localized Trump, say, get in power, and then he would maybe appoint somebody that is not popular by the voters in California, or enough of the other voters in California. No, it would be as it was in many states, not all, but in many states the senators were elected by their state senates or assemblies, and then sent to Washington, and then have the popular election of the House of Representatives for the United States. I would sort of prefer that. Again, it's representative form of government in which people at maybe different levels and in different amounts vote, and I like in the U.S. that vote is voluntary, where you have such high voting totals in Australia, in that it is, my understanding, it is illegal not to vote. Not that you go to jail or anything, but you, I think, get a fine or something in your taxes if you don't vote. I don't know. So if people don't want to vote, they don't need to vote. If they want to vote, great. They can vote so long as they meet whatever the local requirements are, not be a felon or whatever it might be. I'm against people in jail, in prison, not just in jail for 2 nights for doing something bad, but in prison from voting. I don't think they should, but basically, I would like the people to vote. But that doesn't mean, like I've said here, in that the people vote on everything, on every election, that it is a representative form of government that represents the people. But part of the reason I want to do that, and part of the reason for the state senators, is so that you don't have one terrorist attack, whether it's 9/11 or whatever else, and then everybody, yeah, let's do this new law that's gonna go kill all the terrorists and do all these bad things to terrorists, and then 10 years later you're going, yeah, some of that stuff in that law was good, but there was a lot of other bad things that we should have realized. Well, hopefully if you have a good representatives, they'll read the laws and understand the intended and unintended consequences of the laws and make good decisions on just what the laws should be. And so that's sort of why I do it. Okay, well, this was my monologue based off of the events in Turkey, and how it may not be a democratic coup, but it may be a coup to restore the secular constitution and the secular government of Turkey, and that could be a good thing if it succeeds. Now, of course, it could be just a coup that's going to turn out and put a particular Turkish general in charge, that he's going to become some dictator and do all kinds of crazy bad things. Could be that too. That's why I say I generally think I support the coup. I don't know enough about the players in the coup, and of course, it's when I'm making part of this, it sounds like some of the stuff is falling apart in Turkey, but I don't know whether that's just an impression or reality. It might blow up into a whole civil war there, I don't know. But so I generally think I support the coup without knowing too many details. So thanks for watching. Come back for more Hearts of Iron. Please post questions, comments. See you next time.